Hey, my science friends, let's go ahead and jump right on back into the final section of Module 9. It begins on page 293, and our subject heading is Why do so many scientists believe in macroevolution? Here we go. In this module, we've laid down some of the basic data relevant to evolution. We have shown that while microevolution is a well-established scientific theory, macroevolution is, at best, an unconfirmed hypothesis. There is no convincing data in favor of the hypothesis and plenty of data contradicting it. Given these facts, why do so many scientists believe in macroevolution? There isn't a simple answer to this question. Instead, there are a host of reasons that tend to lead to this situation. The first reason is that scientists are simply indoctrinated at a very early age to become macroevolutionists. Since alternatives to macroevolution are not allowed in most classrooms, high school or college, students are left with no other explanation to one of life's most critical questions. If you think about it for a moment, you will realize how absurd such a situation is. The whole idea of intellectual pursuit is based on considering alternative ideas. Nevertheless, most schools will not even allow the consideration of any idea for life's origin other than macroevolution. One is forced to wonder why macroevolutionists are so afraid to allow their idea to compete with others. After all, if the evidence supports macroevolution, it should win any honest debate with any other competing hypothesis. Nevertheless, when educators attempt to bring an alternative to macroevolution to the classroom, macroevolutionists mount legal battles to keep it from happening. That seems odd for scientists who believe that their theory can be supported by the data. The next reason so many scientists believe in macroevolution is a consequence of the first. Those of us who do not believe in macroevolution are regularly ridiculed on college campuses. The best way to illustrate this is to look at the personal experiences of one of these authors, Dr. J. L. Weil. Personally, I began experiencing the ridicule heaped on creationists when I attended graduate school at the University of Rochester. At that time, I had to choose a professor who would be my research advisor. His role was to direct my research and provide me with the training necessary to become a scientist in my chosen field. I picked my research advisor based on the kind of work that he did. The man I chose did what I considered to be the most interesting chemical research that went on at the University of Rochester. While he was, in fact, an incredibly gifted scientist, my chosen research advisor was a committed macroevolutionist. As my creationist views became apparent to him, he ridiculed them. Of course, he would not discuss the data relevant to macroevolution with me. Instead, he simply made fun of me. In addition, one of the other members of our research team, a man I still consider to be the greatest scientist with whom I have ever worked, also constantly made fun of my creationist stand. Such a situation was very difficult for me. After all, I admired these two men. I aspired to become the caliber of scientists that they both were. Nevertheless, they made fun of my most strongly held scientific beliefs. Throughout my graduate school career, I concluded that If I was not as strongly convinced as I was by the data, I would have left my creationist stand. I would have left my creationist stand behind to escape the ridicule of these scientific role models. Sadly, Dr. Weil's story is very common among creation scientists. When macroevolutionists encounter students who do not believe as they do, the response is rarely an intellectual discussion of the facts related to macroevolution. Instead, the response is often public ridicule. The third reason that most scientists still believe in macroevolution stems from the fact that most of the scientists have never investigated the data. There is, of course, a very good reason for this. Any time that a scientist spends researching something not directly related to his field, the less likely he is to become a great scientist. Today's science is so intricate and so specialized that a person must devote himself completely to his field or he'll be left behind. Thus, since scientists have been indoctrinated over the years to believe that macroevolution is the only scientifically sound belief system, they are not about to waste time and energy researching the facts surrounding the issue. The wasted time could damage their careers. In addition to the time constraints that inhibit scientists in examining questions outside of their field, there is a definite pressure in the university setting to either believe in macroevolution or simply stay quiet about it. For example, a professor of biology at San Francisco State University was forbidden to teach the introductory biology course that he had been teaching for more than a decade because he began stressing the design elements that are prevalent in the world around us. The biology department felt that this would confuse students when they later reached a course on evolution, so they forbade him to teach that course. Another example comes from Oregon Community College. A professor of biology at that school was fired because he refused to state in class that macroevolution was a scientific fact. His former department chair said that he was an excellent teacher, and his student evaluations indicate that he was a challenging and well-loved teacher. Nevertheless, he was fired because he actually paid attention to the data and realized that macroevolution is, at best, an unconfirmed hypothesis. Creationist professors regularly feel great pressure from their universities to keep quiet about their creationist views, or they might very well lose their jobs. In the end, then, scientists are indoctrinated at a very early age to be macroevolutionists. They're ridiculed throughout their careers if they believe otherwise. They usually cannot spare the time necessary to look into the facts regarding macroevolution, and they're often punished for believing anything else. These issues keep scientists from learning the data necessary to help them understand the fact that macroevolution is no more than an unconfirmed hypothesis. Although this assessment is rather grim, we must point out that times are changing. More and more books questioning macroevolution are being written by respected university professors. These books have obviously had an impact. In 2004, a Gallup poll showed that only about 1/3 of Americans believe that Darwin's theory of evolution is supported by the evidence. 45% of Americans believe that God created human beings in their present form about 10,000 years ago. In addition, about 15% of high school teachers teach both creation and evolution side by side, and close to 20% of them reject macroevolution. Despite the fact that macroevolutionists have been trying to monopolize the education system for decades, macroevolution has not gained much ground with students and teachers. Before we end this module, we must make one cautionary note. We have only scratched the surface of the hypothesis of macroevolution and the various data that relate to it. If you are interested in learning more about this interesting topic, you should go to the course website that we discussed in the student notes section of the book. There are many links to several places where you can learn more details about the subjects we have discussed here, as well as other topics that we simply did not have the time to address. Wow, my science friends, that's the end of Module 9, Evolution, part Scientific Theory, part Unconfirmed Hypothesis. I'll see you next time for Module 10, Ecology. Bye for now.